understanding that and allowing myself to walk into a space where your feminine was required as part of the process was part of the healing for me. And I think that part, that growth and that kind of getting over that kind of block and injury kind of mom trauma I had was probably the most important piece for me.
Welcome to Doing the Dang Thing podcast. I am your host, Jill Schmeeding, and this podcast is all about helping everyday women play big and aspire for more. On today's episode, I have a special guest, Sarah Davis, and she is here to tell her personal story of how she recently played big by participating in a burlesque show. But more importantly, she talks openly and vulnerably about her struggle with body shaming. If this is something that you can relate to, or you find that you're struggling with body shaming yourself, which I think a lot of people do, I encourage you to tune into this episode. She is going to be sharing her story, providing tools and support to overcome it, or at least to move the needle forward, as they say, with this whole idea of what the world makes us feel like we have to look like, right? So if you struggle with negative thoughts, if you struggle with self-love, please stay tuned. You will not be disappointed. This is a great interview. I really enjoyed talking to Sarah, and I think you too will enjoy hearing what she has to say. Without further ado, please welcome Sarah Davis to the show. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today to talk a little bit about something that you did most recently in your life, a playing big moment, would you say? Playing big, playing huge?
Real big.
Yeah. Yes. And this is something that I was like, so just to give the audience and my listeners some background, we just recently connected and met not too long ago. It's just kind of a small world, 6 degrees of separation. And in our case, like 1 degree of separation, right?
Yep.
Yep. And so we kind of had some mutual friends. We got to know each other. And then I recently learned that you were going to be a part of a burlesque show. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. And then you were kind enough to invite a lot of the girls that we hang out with to the show, me being one of them. And I would love to just talk to you a little bit about the fact that you played really big and kind of what was going through your mind, why you decided to do it, and what goal you accomplished, if you accomplished a goal.
Absolutely. Let's talk about it.
Perfect. Okay. Well, before we jump in, like one of the things I will say is I didn't know what burlesque was, I guess, before I kind of met you. I had an idea of what the show would be, but can you tell a little bit about what burlesque is, in your opinion?
Yeah, I probably should say I really didn't know a whole lot either. I had been to one burlesque performance, maybe about 5 years ago. A bunch of people had taken me for my birthday, and it was really fun. So I kind of knew what it was. I kind of knew that it was kind of an older style of dancing and kind of erotic. You're obviously taking your clothes off to some extent, but there's a flavor to it that's kind of a little more classy than just stripping, as an example. And it's not a better or worse comparison. It's just, it's all about the tease and, not just, can I rip all of this off and show everything, but kind of the art of the tease, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get into this a little bit more in the show, but I will say there were multiple people, multiple individuals doing this, and each of their, what was it, 2 to 3 minutes that they were on stage?
Like a normal song length.
Yeah. Each of the shows were very different.
Yes, absolutely. I thought that was actually really cool to see myself.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. How did you hear about the burlesque opportunity here in Denver?
So I've
And who
actually,
did you do it through?
yeah, I've looked it up a couple times actually over the years. I don't know why burlesque particularly called to me. I remember probably over a decade ago getting a book from the library about burlesque and being kind of fascinated. But yeah, I've looked it up a couple times, classes, and never pulled the trigger. And it was maybe late November, December, I looked it up again, and I was kind of finishing up a divorce after a very long marriage and another kind of toxic relationship, living by myself for the first time, doing a lot of healing. And it was just still really heavy on my mind. And so I looked it up. I found a class and I emailed about it. It was actually full, that one that was starting. And so I went ahead and signed up for the next one, which was several months away. So I had a couple months to think about it and I was nervous the whole time. But it was through it called Badass Burlesque here in Denver, and an awesome girl runs it and has a bunch of different levels of different classes, and she's a burlesque performer herself. So yeah, that's who I found, and that's who I did the class through.
Okay, very cool. And one thing I wanted to bring up was, would you say that this is your like you're a very outdoorsy individual, would you say?
Yes, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I kind of forgot at the very beginning to ask to tell a little bit about yourself. Do you want to go into that, because your performance has to do with that as well, which is one of the things that I really loved about your performance, which we'll talk about too, but would you like to just say a little bit about who you are and a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm 45 years old. I was raised as a missionary kid in Asia by extremely strict, kind of cultish strict, evangelical missionaries. Um, I got married when I was 20 and had two kids shortly after. So really spent the majority of, my 20s and 30s raising kids. I had started a small business of my own. And then as my kids got older, I realized what I really loved was being outside. And I started working in the outdoor field as a guide trainer. I managed a zipline course until recently and just loved it. So that's kind of where my heart is. All of my free time I generally spend on a bike or on a hiking trail or in a kayak. It's just, I know it's where I feel safe. It's where I feel closest to my higher self, my guides, all of those things. It's where I process very well. So yes, I do love the outdoors. That is where I'm the happiest.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm getting to know you a little bit by little, and we're going to go on a little bit of a trip this summer that
So
I'm very
excited.
excited about. Yeah, a little river
So
float trip.
excited.
I have no idea what to expect, but I am looking forward to it nevertheless. So yeah, I look forward to having your expertise out there in the wilderness. What would you say? I just want to touch on, because I'm still learning a lot about you. Like I said, your upbringing and the cult-like evangelical stuff, because I grew up Christian, Lutheran specifically. I have a different experience with my faith, and so I like to talk to people about what they experienced. How do you think that had an impact on your life overall?
Wow, we could talk about that forever and ever, but it changed me. It made me who I am. It damaged me in a lot of ways that I will never be free from in this life, I don't believe. Um, it was, just to kind of give the listeners a little bit of illumination, it was on the extreme end, checks every boxes for a cult. So when I say it was Christian, I don't want them to get it confused with perhaps how you were raised. This was, about as far as it goes. in evangelical Christianity. So there was just an enormous amount of shame around sexuality, sex, bodies, anything to do with any of that. It wasn't spoken about. It was just shamed. As a woman growing up like that, as a girl, I wasn't allowed to wear pants. We only wore long skirts and things that covered everything. Um, Shamed. I remember very specifically my mom acting like I had done something wrong because a shirt was too tight that I wore. And I wasn't trying to be any kind of thing. She was just like, that's too tight. I'm like, well, it just happens to be a shirt in my closet. It wasn't even tight. But just to kind of give an idea of how extreme this culture was that I was raised in.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. It is fascinating to me how different people, get to experience faith, Christianity, whatever the religion is, right? I feel like there's opposite sides to every religion. So it does have an impact on our lives in so many different ways. And I appreciate you sharing that. In regards to as an adult now, how do you go about kind of, I guess, kind of course correcting, would you say?
Yeah, I've spent decades, I feel like, trying to course correct. And I feel like I'm I'm a little afraid to say it out loud almost, but I know that's, doesn't really affect it. But I feel like I'm kind of coming towards the other end of a lot of that healing. What I think I struggle with a little bit still is the programming that gets done, when you're a child, the programming about, love and everything about interaction and how am I loved and how do I love and all of those things. That programming is really hard to undo, even when you know that it's happening. So I'm constantly aware of that. And yeah, I feel like I have spent enormous amounts of years unraveling and healing, and trying to get back to who am I really? What am I doing on this earth? Why am I here? And how can I be the most authentic person I can be?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that plays right into this whole playing big idea, right? That I talk about on this
Yeah.
podcast so much. Playing big, aspiring for more, coming to find our something that Heather, Heather
Yes.
as well. I mentioned Heather on almost every episode. I don't know why. But she just said something to me the other day that I felt like resonated with this idea of like, who is an everyday woman, right? Because I always say everyday women, helping everyday women play big and aspire for more. Well, she said to me that the other day that our group of women that we hang out with, including her, we're all moving towards finding our truest self, moving in a brave way to find our truest self. And I was like, oh, that so resonates with me. And so I guess my next question would be, what made you want to play big with burlesque? I mean, of all the things that you could have done, why that?
Oh, yeah, I think there was probably some outside help in knowing that that was exactly the right thing I needed to put all the pieces together. As I was thinking about what really contributed to what made me who I am in the moment to choose that for myself, it was that religious shame that I talked about. And then I've also dealt with my entire life since, probably I was 10 years old, kind of this cultural shame around my body. And I will speak as a white woman and the cultural shame from kind of an American mindset. So, as white women, especially of my age, we are told in every aspect what we are to look like and what is acceptable and good. It's not even what the desire is. It is good or bad. And essentially, from the moment I had anything on my body that was not just, a small child, as soon as I hit puberty, I was bad for just the way my body was shaped. And I know, and again, I have to speak for white women because I am one. We live in a world where we've been told that Barbie dolls are it and everything else is wrong. So I spent years, most of my years of my life really, trying to hide my body and my shape, trying to be skinnier. I mean, the amount of effort in my life I have put into being thinner is gross. It's so gross. The amount of time I put into shaming my body, saying horrible things to my body, not being grateful for my body is just so fundamentally sad. So I had the religious shame thing going on in a huge way. I had the cultural shame thing going on in a huge way, just about the way my body is shaped. And for the listeners, I'm just a curvy, athletic girl. I'm just not Barbie. I have a big old ass and I got big thighs and I'm strong, and that's just how it is. I have tried my entire life to, not my entire life, but a majority of it, to be smaller, be thinner, look more like the status quo, and it just isn't me. That's not where my body is happy. So, I've fought that for a long time. And in thinking of kind of the journey I've been on in body love, I realized that maybe 7, 8, 9 years ago, I had come to a place where I thought, okay, I think I am doing this body love thing. But I wasn't really. I was doing like acceptance. I was like, okay, I accept that my soul is being carried around in this body. And I'm going to have to deal with it, but that's not love. And I realized this is part of that. Falling in love with my whole self, putting it all together in one piece instead of having it very separated from each other, where I'm just disgusted by this, meat suit that has been given the challenge of carrying around my soul. And that's a pretty big job. And how dare we spend any of our time in shame or hatred of this vehicle that's carrying our soul. That's really very tragic for any humans. Any time we spend not absolutely celebrating the amazingness of what happens in this human experience.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I feel you. I feel your pain. I feel your frustration, because I know that for me, I told you just the other day, I was like, I would kill to have a booty like yours, And it's one of those things where we constantly look at other women with envy about their boobs, their butts, their stomachs, their arms, their legs, everything, their hair.
Yeah.
I envy people's hair all the time. And you have beautiful dreadlocks, which I think is just amazing. And another indication of you want to be, different, right? Than the stereotypical, you could say, white person, right? Which I think is amazing. I think it's amazing. So yeah, it's a challenge that I think we all face. And I think you said it quite nicely when you said, the amount of negative talk that we do to our bodies that carry our souls is tragic.
Yeah. I think the last piece of all of that for me is, as far as the burlesque and that being the important kind of thing that I needed to wrap all this together, was just kind of a place of personal discomfort. So I'm not a dancer. I grew up being taught that dancing was bad. So even dancing like at a wedding or anything like that was a really uncomfortable place for me. So dancing, I think, had a really big piece in that. Dancing has been very healing for me over the last couple years. And, so I think dance played a big role representing kind of freedom and freedom in your body. But yeah, I'm an outdoor girl. I hike and I bike, and while, I assume I present feminine, I excel at things that are viewed more masculine-y, more hard. lifting heavy weights, stuff like this, that is not perceived very feminine. And I think that's really important, that perceived feminine goes in front of things like wearing makeup or perceived masculine, like lifting heavy weights, because those are not the true essence of masculinity and femininity. But for me to, like you were talking about, wearing sparkly things or stuff like that feel uncomfortable. For me, this was like putting on this enormous sparkly thing that felt really uncomfortable. And so that level of discomfort there felt like a necessary piece for me.
Okay. So I was going to, so even though it was uncomfortable, you felt like on your inside, your intuition was saying, I have to do this?
Yeah, without a doubt. It felt like something I had to do. When I signed up for the class, my understanding was that we would take this class. It was 9 weeks, once a week. And then at the end, we were all going to do a performance where we were all doing solos. That's what I understood, and I probably misread it. What actually happened was the class did a number together, and then we could do an optional solo. And when the teacher said that on like week 2 or 3, like, oh, the solos you can do if you want to or not. And some of the girls are like, oh yeah, I'm definitely not doing a solo. But I knew I had signed up. I assumed I had to do a solo. And before I could like back out, I, put my name on the list that I was going to do a solo, because I knew that was going to be a big, that was like the challenge for me. It was going to be that piece of it.
Absolutely. How many women actually didn't do the solos in the very end?
I think my class, which was the level 1 class, obviously, I think we had 10 in the total class, and I think maybe 6 did solos from my class.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So it was, it was over 2 hours of a performance with like a 10-minute intermission. So was it level 1 and
Correct.
Level 2? I was confused.
It was level 1 and level 2, and I think maybe some level 3 in there. So,
Okay.
There was maybe 6 solos from my class. All those other solos were from the higher levels.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Okay. Yeah. And like I said, every show was different. The music was different. Some of them were a little bit more traditional, burlesque-y,
yes.
Right? Some of them actually, like one woman came out, she wasn't wearing very much clothes. She didn't take any clothes off. She just kind of danced.
Yeah. Some of them.
So you had that freedom.
Yeah, we didn't get a lot of direction, honestly. I wish the teacher had been a little different in that regard, given a little more direction about what is burlesque, what's the flavor, how to approach. But we didn't get any assistance much in like choreographing or anything like that. So we were really kind of just on our own. Pick your music, pick your clothes, pick your choreography, which was, quite challenging for someone who's not a dancer. There were girls in my class that had danced in college and had pretty extensive dance backgrounds, and that was very intimidating. Because, we start like the class 1 and the teacher's like, do a plie, or, using all these words. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? I don't know what that is. And I thought this was level 1 and everyone else knew what it was. Not everyone else, but, and that felt like, I want to leave right now. But, it was an enormous, I told one of the girls in the class that has really become a friend of mine. I told her that without doubt, I felt like it was divinely, orchestrated that she was in my class. She kind of became just my little cheerleader, and knowing she was there, and she was going to tell me everything I did was fabulous, and, check in on me and ask how my solo was going, and all of that, was really a very sweet gift.
Yeah. Yeah. We all need those friends that are like our cheerleaders, So that brings me to my next question that I was thinking about was, what did you enjoy most about your experience?
Oh, I think this has answer changed a little bit. And like we talked last week, like now that it's been 3 weeks, I think, since that my brain's kind of been able to shuffle through it a bit. I think what I enjoyed, through the experience was actually, something I really knew I needed to work on, but it really kind of came full circle for me. And that was understanding a piece of my femininity. So, before like fall or so, I had really sat down and very seriously decided to address why I was more comfortable with men as friends than as women. And I have really struggled through the years to connect with women, other moms, when I had kids and stuff like this. And I couldn't ever really quite figure it out. And as I put some time into that, I realized that I felt very, very unsafe in the presence of feminine. And that is because my mom was very, very unsafe. So I was safe being in my masculine. So that's how I proceeded in life. Running things, taking care of everything, being organized, being in charge, all of these places where I felt very safe and in control. And I felt very unsafe, in my own feminine. So that was a big piece of that as well. And in understanding that and allowing myself to walk into a space where your feminine was required, as part of the process, was part of the healing for me. And I think that part, that growth and that kind of getting over that kind of block and injury kind of mom trauma I had was probably the most important piece for me.
Okay. So would you say that's the most important or the most enjoyable?
I would say that's the most valuable. The most enjoyable, I think, actually was probably the night of the performance. Even though I was so nervous, having this kind of tribal energy with the other ladies, we're all like so nervous and excited, but we're all going to do this big thing together, and then doing it and being celebrated for it. That was really, really fun.
Yeah, absolutely. How did you celebrate that win? This is a random question, but I was just thinking about that. How did you celebrate this big accomplishment?
Oh, I think that was kind of maybe just personal between just kind of me and myself. I did go out with one of my good friends, Sarah, after she was at the show, and just was such a supporter through the whole thing. And we went out and had dinner afterwards. But I felt like I was in a little bit of a shock after that show. I couldn't make my brain quite think right. So over the next week, I think it kind of unraveled in my brain a little bit for me. And I was just so grateful.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. You bring up this idea of the feminine and the masculine, which I think needs to be a whole nother podcast episode, because if I'm being honest with you, we talked about this at a party the other day. I still don't understand what it is. And, I do think the feminine is wearing, nails done, hair done, eyelashes are fake. Everything is put together, makeup on, maybe you're wearing some sort of dress or skirt, right?
Yeah.
But I know that's not what it is. So we won't necessarily dive into that right now, but you bring that up and I'm always just like, wait, how do I channel my femininity, my feminine side? And so that's a conversation we can dive into another day, but I understand what you're saying about the healing from that with your mom.
Yes. I mean, you're right. There's so much more to it, so much that I don't even understand. And that's why I used perceived feminine regarding makeup and jewelry and dressing a certain way, because that's not what it is. Those things are lovely.
Correct.
If you like those things, put them on yourself. I have no issue with that, whatever, but it doesn't make me any less feminine because I don't wear mascara every day or, have lashes put on or whatever. So when I was making my routine, I had put a lot of work into the choreography. And I kind of had this thing set and I was starting to try to practice it. And it just, it did not feel right. It didn't feel great. And then I was just sitting in the car one day and I think I had been texting you And I was still searching for the right outfit and what I wanted to appear. And it just hit me, this idea, for my choreography. Like, what is this about? My therapist had said, like, stop thinking about everyone else. This is about you and how you feel. And, you know, this journey is your journey. Fuck everyone in the audience. It's not about them. It's about you. That's why you signed up. And so I was trying to remember that. And I thought, well, this is kind of my journey. I want to show how I can be who I am and also be incredibly soft and, again, perceived feminine, and have all of that be part of me. And it's all feminine. So, for the people who are listening, my routine started, I was completely in outdoor gear like I would normally be in: pants, jacket, backpack, hat, the whole thing. And, you know, by the end, I was wearing a flower crown with, you know, a very kind of feminine colored piece of lingerie, and looking very soft and feminine that way. So kind of progressing through that in my choreography is what kind of hit me as what would feel right to me. And it did. And I don't know that everyone in the audience totally understood the progression, but it was for me. It wasn't for anyone else.
Yeah. Yeah, amen to that. It was for you. And boy, I got it because I want to do your performance just a little bit of justice, because it was really cool. You came out on stage with, like you said, everything, all of your hiking gear. You take off the backpack, you set that on the stage, you sit in a chair, I think, and then you take off your baseball hat, and you then put on the flower crown. And I think in that moment, I was just like, oh my God, the transition, you know, was really, really tasteful. It was really good. It was really, really good. And then from there, you tactfully
stripped, baby.
Stripped. Yeah, exactly. And if, for all the listeners out there who will never see the show, boy, she had the best reveal, because you had like these well, what do you call them?
It took me a long time to find them, actually, but they were like an athletic pant that snapped up both sides all the way to the waist, so you could like completely get them off.
Yeah, those were like super popular in the 90s.
Yes, I had to look hard for them.
Yeah, like I remember that. Probably on eBay or something. I definitely remember those being super popular when I was in like high school, with like the rip away pants, you know? Yeah. And so, yeah, you did a very good job of ripping away those pants in a very awesome, very sexy, very feminine way. So yeah, it was a great performance. I really enjoyed it. And I'm not just saying that because you're my friend. I really did enjoy it. Yeah, absolutely. What would you say? I asked you what your most, enjoyable part was. We talked about the most valuable part, but what would have liked to been better, or like if you could do it all over again, would you adjust your mental state, or do something different? I'm just wondering, like, is there anything that you're like, oh, that was my least favorite part, and I wish I could do this over again if I had to?
Gosh, if I were doing it over again with the knowledge I have, of course, that's a whole different game. When I look back at the experience from where I was and the skills that I had, dance-wise, choreography-wise, all of that, I wouldn't have changed it. I really felt like I put 400%. Every drop of uncomfortable, I put out there. If I had to do it again, or kind of looking back, I cut my song really short because I was so uncomfortable. I think I would have challenged myself maybe, now this is after watching the other girls, so that's hard to look back on, but I could have done some more time, taken my time a little bit more. But that's what I needed in the moment. Like, just knowing I had that much time to get through and to make those many moves in that much time. Again, not a dancer. So like, I'm not going to be up there doing the splits and doing some of those crazy, beautiful moves that some of those other women did.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that, I think I would have been a little less concerned, and because I whined to you about it, about my outfit. I wanted to be so comfortable, and I wanted it to be so perfect, that I ordered like 500 outfits and tried them on and returned them. And I wish I had been a little less consumed with that. Like, oh my gosh, a roll might come out here, a roll might come out there. It doesn't matter. But in that moment, that mattered to
Yeah.
me. It was like a little bit of a security blanket, I think, like having something that made me feel, um, I don't even know the right words here, that made me feel comfortable and kind of put together. I just figured I'm on stage, like, I want this to look kind of professional, I guess, or something. I'm sorry, I'm lacking a word here, but it
No,
just
that's
to me
okay.
is different than what I might wear in the bedroom for like a lover. Like I'd put all kinds of stringy things on in that case and feel okay about it. But on
Yeah.
stage, like, I thought it would look better that, my G string didn't get swallowed in a roll, you know?
You're too funny. Oh man, the problems thick women go through. I tell you what.
And turns out, and I've had men tell me this, and it's true often. Like, and a lot of women actually told me this too from the show and other burlesque shows. Like, we actually enjoyed the women that like had, were a little curvier, because they're just
Yes.
like kind of really living in their bodies. And yeah, which is another really interesting paradigm that happens in a world that we live in with all the body stuff we kind of covered before. But I think something else I really learned from being in that group of ladies is it doesn't matter what you're shaped like. We're all struggling with really similar things. And again, really heartbreaking,
Yeah.
because every single human in my class was, and in that whole night, so beautiful in their own ways. Um, but we all operate in this place of lack. Like, if I could just have these titties, if I could just have this butt, if I could just have this smaller, if I could just have this larger, if I could just do the splits, if I could just, and if we collectively started, especially as women, started to operate out of a place of, I am magnificent. I am whole. I am beautiful. What I was given, again, to carry around this soul in this ride is magical and perfect for exactly what I needed to learn, exactly how I needed to complete my purpose while I'm down here on this earth. I think that would change a lot of things.
I agree completely. Wow. I agree completely. Let me just absorb that for a second. Oh,
Easier
yeah.
said than done.
It is. It is. It is. And, I will say this. I just want to second that. It's so interesting. All the women were beautiful. Like you said, I want to second that
Yeah.
and say that out loud. All the women were beautiful. But boy, what some of those thicker women, it's just, I don't know if it's like one of those things where it just, to me, like, I was just like, wow, I see a woman that has similar issues that I have, right? When I say issues, I mean cellulite or stretch marks or whatever the situation. Their butt's not
Yeah.
like the magazines, right? And I'm just like, oh my, and when I look at them, I'm like, damn, she's beautiful. But it's so interesting that when I look at myself, I'm just like, yeah, I'm beautiful and I do feel beautiful. I really, really do. When I look at myself in the mirror, and I look at myself in the mirror often, right? With no clothes on all the time. I'm just like half getting
Right.
ready every morning with no clothes on. I'm one of those individuals. And so, but it's just like when I look at myself and I look at the areas of my body that I don't love, I can't see the beauty. And the thing that pisses me off the most is when I'm not a virgin, for my parents, if they ever listen to the show. For the men, for the men who I am with in my life and have been in my life, they see the beauty. Why the fuck can't I see the beauty? And yet when I look at a woman who's very similar to me, I see beauty. I don't understand it. And so and some people I think question like, why does Jill like to be at bathhouses like everyone's naked, right? Why is Jill kind of, I feel like people are questioning why I'm obsessed with being naked all the time. But the thing is like, I feel like there's a part of me that's like, the more women that I can see that are all natural and beautiful and not perfect according to society, the more it helps me see myself in a way that I'm just like, I'm beautiful, I'm this, I'm that, you know?
I so agree with that. That's been very healing for me as well. Yeah. Something about that reflection in others, I think, as opposed to media. So like, why aren't we getting our information from other women? We're getting our information from men telling us this is what you should be like, look like, whatever. Why do we allow that? As women in our society, in American society, we're getting to a place where we're like, oh, we're almost equal. We're almost this and that. And we still are not. We are still under the rule of what men will allow us to do. And anyone who tells you different isn't looking at the big picture. Within this class of burlesque, I was saying, as we were talking about outfits, one of the girls is like, oh, well, I got this and this is blah, 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 blah. And we were talking about, you know, garters and this and that. And I was like, you do understand that every piece that you have on your body was created by a man, right? Like, take a broader look, ladies. We are still operating in an absolute man's world. If you see a woman that is running something, and I don't want to put all on this, but I would say if a woman is high end running a company here or there, she's likely heavily in her masculine and operating as if she were a man. We are not at a place in society yet where truly living in your feminine as a woman would be a place that is considered equal. And lingerie is another really good example of that.
Yeah. So what about like Kim Kardashian and her line? I know this is us going off on a tangent, but it's like, what about Kim Kardashian and like what?
Well, Kim Kardashian has made her entire career off of the male gaze. Now, has she bossed bitched through that? Absolutely. And no shade on her. She is a smart woman. All of those in that family, incredibly smart. Anyone who thinks, oh, they're just dumb, whatever, they are wrong. They are working the system. But again, they're working the system that they were born into. They've had their bodies modified for a very specific reason, and it's not for other women.
Yeah. Then just pause for a second. It's funny. I was looking at Kim Kardashian pictures the other day and I was like going back in the day versus what she looks like now. And I'm just like, I am not bamboozled because I know it's all whatever, but it's just crazy to me. Like the difference her body, has taken on. But what, let me ask you a question just really quick. Cause I know that's a tangent that we could go down for hours, but it's like, what would it look like? This is maybe you won't have an answer, but what would it look like for someone to operate in their feminine and create lingerie? I guess I'm just a random question. I'm wondering if so I can understand.
Right. I think that's a really good question. And I think we need to talk about that probably as our group of friends and see where we get with that, because I also feel really stalled there because I'm like, okay, what would I feel very beautiful in? And then I go, okay, well, I feel good in this thing that makes my titties look really good. And then I'm like, okay, why do I fucking care about that? Let me rewind that and try to undo that. Why do I want to accentuate my ass? Oh, because guys really like that. That's like my best feature. So yeah, it's really hard to unravel that. And I've done part of that work, but I have not unraveled that to the core either. Just another way we walk away from our own authenticity every time we do that. But it's
I'm guilty.
we do it every single day, all day long. We don't ask ourselves, what would I like? What would I feel good in? We take all of these outside influences. And again, we live in relationship to other people. So that is part of this human experience. That's always going to be a part, because it feels darn good for someone to be like, hey, you're really sexy, or you're beautiful. I was married for 24 years and not once did my ex-husband tell me I was beautiful. And the damage that does, I think, to the deep feminine part of me is big. It's big. So yes, we relate to other people, and obviously what they say to us matters. But I think, especially in our little group of lovely women, like when we say to each other something like, "You are just so beautiful today," like we mean so much more than that shirt or that dress. Sometimes we do say, "You look like a fucking killer in that dress." You know what I mean? But that's also separate from, like I said to Heather yesterday, I'm just so proud of you and that relationship thing you moved through. That is just, it's so beautiful to get to watch that in somebody.
Speaking of other women, would you recommend, and I know this is just your personal opinion, would you recommend a burlesque show for other women? Like, would you say, hey, yeah, this is amazing, yes, do it? Or would you be like,
absolutely
maybe not
recommend? It was all the things I hoped for myself personally, but I think in general, because looking at my class, the women were just of all ages, of all experiences, of all religious backgrounds, of different sexual preferences, just a huge variety. And it was really interesting to see them also move through it with me, coming from really different places. But I think in general, it was just so healing and empowering. I know when I came out after I did my dances and was just in the audience watching the other women, to me, the vibe felt very much like women are running this fucking place right now.
I agree with that.
So from that perspective, and I think because you're doing it in that feminine, that is where the kind of authenticity lies that we talked about a little bit more, or a little bit earlier. I'm sorry. When you're running the show, but you're in that feminine, which I think we don't get to see a lot of. It's just really empowering.
Wow. I wish there was a guidebook. I mean, on like how to tap in. What does it mean to be feminine, right? And then just do that.
Yes,
stay
I
in
want
that.
to explore that.
Yeah, not stay, because I feel like, there's reasons why we have to be in our masculine, and I get it.
There's good. Yeah, we all have both. It's all about balance.
Yeah. So just to recap, what was the one thing that you would say you wanted most to happen through this experience?
I think the thing that I was looking for most was freedom. I wanted to be free of that shame and oppression and kind of boundaries on what I could and couldn't do as a woman in this body. Couldn't do because of Jesus. Couldn't do because of my body's not the perfect body. Couldn't do because I was too scared to look at myself in the mirror. All of those things. I just wanted freedom from all of those things that had been haunting me for so long.
And you accomplished that, would you say?
Yeah. Yes,
That's
I felt
good.
like it was kind of, for me, a big fuck you to all of that. All of those lies I had been told for so long. From, starting really from when I was born as a girl in, the religious community I was born in. You're born bad. You're born dirty. You're born not a full human. You're born to be a slave, essentially. So, yeah.
Wow. I am sorry that. Yeah, I am very sorry that happened to you.
Yeah, it's part of my journey this time.
Yeah. And now, would you say that going forward, when you do find yourself in a place where you're struggling in some way, shape, or form, you can tap back into this feeling that you had?
Yes. And I feel
like the fuck you freedom attitude?
I feel really different. It's crazy. I was thinking, and this is, some people may relate to this, some people may not, but One of the things that I really struggled with was looking at myself in the mirror, because it was like if I looked at myself in the mirror, I had to accept that this really was this body that I was traveling in. So for all these years, like even something basic like going in a public restroom and like having to look at yourself in these usually not very flattering lights to wash your hands, I would avoid or not look up in the mirror. So going to a dance class where you have to look at yourself in the mirror was, really difficult. And then seeing myself on video was extremely difficult for me. I've never wanted to see myself on video. I really am been very scared of pictures of myself all these years, especially of my body or pictures that I didn't have control of, that, made me look a certain way. But just in the last week, I am trying this new sport with someone, and they videoed me to look at my form. And normally I would have cringed to watch this video and then probably sunk into somewhat of a depression about it. And that seems to have left me. I can look at myself in this video and just be like, oh, well, that's who I am. That looks good. That doesn't look good as far as my form doing this particular sport. And that is a huge departure for me.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's a win
that really
right there.
is. And I think it's something
a huge
I didn't even really think about going into it, because it felt so overwhelming and scary that maybe it wasn't something I was ready to tackle with yet. But I kind of did as an extra piece I didn't know I was going to walk away with.
That's amazing, Sarah. Well, you are an inspiration to many women, and specifically the women in our friend group. I know that for doing this, this wonderful, brave dance
Thank
routine.
you. That you guys all came and showed up.
I really appreciate it.
I don't know if I really have words for how that felt. It felt amazing. Yeah.
Oh, good. Good.
Yeah.
I'm glad. I was so glad when you extended the invitation, and I'm glad that we were able to be there for you.
Thank you so much for coming. It really, it would have been one thing, but to have people there that understood even a small piece of that journey and be able to celebrate that with you was huge.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, for coming on the podcast, for being brave to do that. I really appreciate it. I know that can be kind of scary to open up and be vulnerable, but I really appreciate it. And I think so many of the listeners out there can resonate with what you said, especially just about our bodies, how we view ourselves, and saying, fuck you, and finding the freedom to move past that judgment that we put on ourselves. And for channeling our inner feminine.
I think we have we're living at a really unique time in history right now, as women, and as women in our 40s, where we're living a really different life than our moms, but also our daughters are living a really different life. And we have a chance to really finally kind of put our foot down and be like, yeah, no more of this. We're going to be us, and we're going to be exactly as we are. We're going to be as feminine or as masculine as we want, and we're going to take everything that we deserve.
Wow, that was an incredible interview with Sarah. Thank you so much, Sarah, for coming on the show. I so appreciated our time together. I hope that you got something out of this interview, whether that be just knowing that you're not alone in the struggle of body shaming. There's hope to overcome it, and maybe some ideas on how to push through it. And maybe you too are kind of thinking, is burlesque the right thing for me? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But whatever it is, I encourage you, and this is why you're tuning into this podcast, to play big and aspire for more, which means getting outside of that comfort zone and bravely moving towards becoming your most authentic self, loving that vessel that carries your soul. Thanks, and take care, everyone.